Hi, everybody. This is the Master Plan Implementation Committee meeting. It is October 26th, and I'm calling the meeting to order. First item on the agenda is public comment.
We need to do a roll call.
Thank you. Okay, this is a Zoom-only meeting, so we'll do a roll call. Demiria, aye.
William Warren, aye.
Fibers here.
Catherine McKee here.
Judith, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. Watson here.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have anyone in the audience for public comment?
Yes, Claire Reynolds, and I'm going to click to allow to talk, and she should be able to join us in a moment. Claire, let us know when you are unmuted.
Hey guys, I'm just sitting in the audience.
Oh, you just want to sit? Okay.
Didn't have your hand up.
My apologies. I'm sorry.
You're okay.
That's okay.
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 Claire.
So I will.
Thanks for joining.
I'll remove permission to talk, I guess, and just raise your hand if you have any questions.
Thanks for joining, Claire. Okay, the second topic on the agenda is potential joint meeting with the Planning Board and Select Board to discuss prioritization of goals. Okay, so this is an item that is sort of been kicking around for a while, and I'd say that I want to give a small update of our last meeting at the Planning Board last week. The Planning Board, I would say, overall is in favor of taking a look at the master plan goals and collectively coming up with a prioritization or a list of priorities. And I would just want to say thank you to Sam Stivers for putting this thought forward. I think it's a nice opportunity for boards to get together to hear each other and have this discussion. It was a, let's just say not all of the board members were ready to discuss their ideas about which goals or recommendations they wanted to put forward as priorities. So that checked with Mimi Littrell, the chair, and she has put it on the agenda for our next meeting, which is, I think it's not next week, but the week after. It looks like November 6th. So Sam, I don't know if you want to add a little color to that.
Yeah, I guess I was disappointed in the discussion, as a matter of fact, in the sense that we had actually raised that issue previously with the Planning Board in concept. And the point that I was trying to make was that, as we've discussed here, the Select Board did a goal-setting exercise back in July. It came up with a number of goals. And the Planning Board owns the master plan, but the Planning Board doesn't have the budget influence that the Select Board does. So my theory was that we ought to try to tie those together, and where we can reasonably find ways to work together on goals, because the Select Board continues to push on the goals that we selected, and in many cases find funding or resources to make some of those things happen. Not all of them, probably. But the more we can link to that, the more success we will be able to get, I think, in terms of master plan goals. And there's not going to be perfect overlap, certainly. But again, it seems to me that the part of the Planning Board's job here is to set some priorities from their perspective as the owners of the master plan for things that they want to see happen. And my point was, I'm certainly open to listening to that. And there were at least a couple of Planning Board members who seemed to think that somehow the Select Board was trying to drive the process and not listen to the Planning Board, et cetera, et cetera. And that was unfortunate, I think. And we sort of waffled around on that. And I think we got to a better place by the end of the meeting. And then Debbie and I had a chance to chat briefly with Mimi Littrell today as part of another meeting. And I think Mimi now understands more clearly sort of what we're trying to do with this. So you know, again, the point was simply that the Select Board was actually reaching out to get input, and the Planning Board, as folks here I think know, sometimes is a little tender about not being listened to by the select board. So that was an effort on our part to actually include them in the process, and that message didn't seem to get through, at least initially. So I think we're in a better place here now, but it was a little disappointing that they didn't jump on board with that a little more quickly. But we are where we are, and I think the opportunity now is to have the planning board come back to us to say, here are things we think are important from a priority standpoint. And then I think I'd mentioned this at this week's select board meeting, and the body language was positive, I would say. And I think the select board is certainly very willing to entertain additional input that the planning board might want to offer here. And again, no guarantees for anything, but at least if we're talking, I think that's a move in the right direction, certainly. So I'm disappointed by the timing, in the sense that by the time the planning board has their discussion and comes up with things, I think we're most of the way through November then, in terms of a special meeting for the planning board and the select board to talk about this, which has been my proposal to the select board. So the challenge is that the farther we get into the end of the year here, we get into the budget cycle. So there's less opportunity to influence the budgets the later we are in terms of coming back to various departments with proposals for budgets. But again, I think we still have time. It's just not as much time now to get our influence into that process. So again, delay, but I think we're still on track to make some progress with this. So,
when actually are you starting the process? I mean, hopefully after our November 6th meeting, depending on what the planning board is looking to do, we'll have a little bit better sense of direction, what they want to do.
The budget cycle, I think the departments are supposed to come back in December with budget proposals, and so people are working on this stuff now, as a matter of fact, I think.
Okay.
So again, even more important to get back into the committee structure and say, folks, if you have things that you care about, particularly master plan related things, let's be sure to at least get them on the table and make proposals.
So Debbie, just so I've got the whole story here, because I didn't have a chance to join that planning board meeting. What is the planning board doing on the 6th of November?
So the ask was to come up with a couple of bullets, priorities that we could bring to the table to have a joint meeting with the select board and this committee. The idea being that as Sam just mentioned, we haven't heard from the planning board, and master plan implementation doesn't take any position on prioritization of goals. So the ask is for them to come up with a number of goals or recommendations that they feel should be potentially, priorities and potentially funded, and to be taken into consideration during the budget cycle. With full realization that, this is just simply input, and it could be taken into consideration among the other things that the select board has on their plate and working through.
And
so are they looking? So is the planning board looking at the goals and recommendations that were assigned to them?
No,
all of the recommendations in the master plan.
So they're looking. So that's correct. They're looking at the all of the goals and recommendations in the master plan. Of course, we all have a master plan book. And, I thought, I take some credit and some credit for the conversation going a little bit sideways. I've tried to give the board members the easy guide to the goals and recommendations. Judith, that's a nice document that you put together by responsibility, so you quickly see, which committees have which goals. And perhaps I didn't explain it correctly, but anyway, at that particular meeting, last meeting, they were not really prepared to bring their ideas forward. So the homework to the planning board members is, take a look at of all of the, goals and recommendations in the master plan, which, planning board knows because, the history of it being, under the planning board. And to come up with, as as a board to come up with a sort of consolidated list of things that they would like for consideration during the budget cycle. So I picture maybe 4 or 5 bullets, maybe some themes. As a planning board member, I put forward an idea and said, well, you know, one of the themes that I think may not be under consideration, you know, might be having something to do with open space or recreation or natural resources. I'd like to see something along that line, you know, maybe represented in the budget cycle. But what we really need to do is go back and look at the specific ones in the, you know, in the recommendations and say, okay, well, what is it exactly? So hopefully we'll come together as a planning board on the 6th, and we'll have a discussion about, you know, maybe some themes in a similar way that Sam has shared with us, some themes that we can share with the select board when we get together.
But Debbie, I guess I'd focus that more, because it seems to me the planning board has, I think, 21 items on their list specifically. So it sure seems to me, and they were, you know, involved in that process. It sure seems to me that if I were on the planning board, I'd focus on those initially, at least, to say, how much do we care about those? Are there things in there that we want to push or recommend? And certainly there's no limit to what the planning board might choose to do in terms of any goal or implementation step, et cetera. But again, you know, I'm from the select board. I've been focusing on the 36 or whatever that are assigned to the select board to try to see what we can pull out of there first versus trying to do other people's work for them.
Yeah.
So that seems to me to be a reasonable focus for the planning board, at least as a starting point for the November discussion.
Good point. Does that answer your question, Judith?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, maybe.
Yeah, meeting is on YouTube, and so
yeah, I will take a look.
If you dare, if you dare, why don't you listen to the 30 minutes of sideways conversations?
Oh, but you can speed play it, so you can get through the pain in half the time.
I forget about that. Thank you, Sam.
So there was one public comment at that meeting, and I think also the planning board seemed interested to know whether there were some boards or committees that have goals that maybe they can't give attention to because of you know, some sort of challenges. So remember on our progress report, I think we have question 7 that says, do you have any challenges with achieving your goals? And one thing I tried to bring up, I'm not sure if it was very successful, because honestly, it was late at night and I was getting tired, but we do have a question on our progress report that says, is there any challenge to reaching your goals? And, you know, now that we're a little bit into it, we should start to see, and Sam, I think you've already mentioned, you're seeing some of your sponsoring groups come back to say, well, yeah, the short-term goals, it looks like we're, you know, we need some help, like we may not make it, or it's looking like we need to work with another board, or we might need some funding. So the planning board was also interested to see if we are collecting that kind of information. So there was sort of a side, the conversation was a little bit of a side conversation. I found that very kind of open and interesting. And I think we are going to hear from many of our groups that they're going, you know, that they're having challenges, and what, you know, is there something that we can do to help them, either connect them with another board, or they might be looking for some sort of, you know, resource.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think that planning board is open to hearing more about boards and committees that are challenged.
Okay, but so, and I think that's a good point, but because my recollection is the planning board specifically said they didn't want the original approach of quarterly reports. They only wanted to hear from the implementation committee twice a year, which means we're going to do, now the communication's gone out to the committees, we'll go back out. My expectation is that So certainly for my groups, I'll go back out and I'll have another conversation with them. But I guess my thought is if the planning board wants to know about issues that crop up as they go along, we're going to have a different process, because if we're only meeting with these groups twice a year for a twice yearly report, I don't know how they're going to, I don't know what the expectation is that we'll be able to channel through issues that come up.
Yeah. I don't know
What's the
that we're
plan
going to
for
solve it
two?
for this December report. I mentioned to the planning board, I think reiterated it to Mimi this morning, that you know, if the planning board has feedback on that report, I tried to get that from them when we delivered the first report, which I think was April, and it was it was the first one, right? But now that we can take a look at it now and say, well, gee, maybe that level of information is a little too high. Of course, there wasn't too much because we had just reached out to our groups, and we, you know, everybody says, oh yeah, I know where the goals are and I know who you are. This next report should, I think, provide a little bit more information to them, especially for those committees that have short-term goals and might be thinking, I may not be able to meet my short-term goal. Now, it was interesting that one of the planning board member said it shouldn't be a leading question, like you shouldn't ask. And of course, we are not asking, like, what do you need to do to accomplish your goal? Do you need, you know, funding? Do you need to? We don't want to ask that. We want them to come to us. And I like the question 7. I think it's properly balanced. It's not a leading question. But I do think as we go out and collect in our cycles, we are going to hear more and more say, I need to feel connected. I need to get together with this other board. I might need a coordinator. I might need some funding. I might need a grant. And that will become an interesting theme that I'd like to try to capture for the planning board in future reports. I'm not sure if that level will come up. And I want to hear maybe from the other members too, if you've had the chance to reach out recently, if you're also hearing that kind of, you know, any kinds of concerns from the sponsoring groups.
I'm interested in the concept, Debbie, but what's the planning board going to do if we tell them these folks are having trouble? I mean, the planning board doesn't have any money basically to spend on stuff, and I don't sense that the planning board is going to get in there and start holding meetings for people who are having difficulty with some of this stuff. So it seems to me it's up to us as liaisons to work with the committees and try to deal with those issues as we reasonably can during the process. So, I mean, it's interesting information, but to me, it's not too actionable by the planning board. And I would certainly share anything I find out with the planning board, but to me, that's sort of more of a academic exercise than a help us move forward exercise.
Yeah, I think what it can be is information that the planning board may, hopefully, will be invited by the select board to, you know, remember we tried this back in June, Sam, and I couldn't get us together fast enough, but you were actually the one that said, hey, we got this goal setting meeting. Wouldn't it be nice if we heard about the planning board's goals and which ones, you know, might put forward, knowing that we're not part of the select board goal setting process. But it's becoming a little bit clear to me that, and I can say this sort of personally because I haven't spoken to the planning board about it, but goals that are already in the master plan should be prioritized, you know, over in any other individual goal. So there was, you know, long process, a lot of input and a lot of work. And if, you know, select board are looking to do their goal setting exercise next July, I don't see a reason why the planning board can't comment on maybe at that time on goal setting. Hey, you know, don't forget this one in the master plan. These short-term ones are coming up, and these goals might need some assistance. So it is an interesting theme. I don't know what we can do with it right now, but I do hope that this next report, we can give a little bit more information, especially if there are boards that are trying to, that are, you know, they're calling for help, you know, so I think in some ways we We're going to reach out. We might hear some things, and then maybe we have a process. Our process is they should come back to our committee and talk to us, right? And so we'll also get more information that way. But we're going to pick it up on the forms too.
I hate to be harsh about this, but I don't think anybody's asking us for help. I think people are asking for money in the budget process.
Asking you and the select board.
From others. Yeah. But I've not had any requests from me as a master plan implementation committee person for help with a particular committee's activity. I mean, I'm certainly willing to listen. And I think part of our job is to try to prime the pump a little bit by talking about the activities that are allocated to various committees and say, how are we doing with this one, that one, the other one? What do you need? Are you making progress, et cetera? And try to funnel places where people, have issues or needs to places where we can provide support or get them connected with people who can. I mean, the sad truth is I don't think many people are paying much attention at all to the master plan at this point, frankly.
And after my note that went out with like multiple typos and multiple errors, they're totally likely to ignore it.
Maybe they may be confused, but at least they saw it. So, so maybe we start now while the attention level is up. But again, I think that part of our job is to follow up individually with people and learn more about where they are in the process and at least keep the communication channel open. And then we can provide some of that connection activity as we compare notes and say, hey, this committee is looking for this and that committee over there is looking for the same kind of thing. So can we facilitate that communication in ways that are helpful for people? So, but again, our visibility, I think, is pretty low at this point, Frank. And people are really busy, so it's hard to get people's attention anywhere on anything. But I think that's part of our task is to provide some energy for this and keep pushing on it.
Yeah. What do the others think? Any thoughts on this? Should we head into the last quarter and reach out to all of our sponsoring groups?
I think that is the next step, and I think the planning board's request. I mean, I think it's going to come through naturally when we fill out the reports. The issues that come up for funding and stuff. I'm not sure there's a more frequent basis that they need to receive the information other than twice a year. I think will be satisfactory.
Yep. And I think all of us have been talking with people out there generally along the way here. So it's not like we haven't been connecting with people, maybe not as focused on the master plan goals, but there's actually a lot of stuff going on. And I think as I looked at the master plan goals and the select board goals, I think there's progress on many fronts out there. Not a huge amount that you can wrap a bow around and say this is all done. But again, I think there's hope for making a visible amount of progress over the next.
Well, that's a good point, Sam. I was thinking the same thing as I was looking through and I saw there's some completes and I know that there's others that are in progress and they will become complete. How do we as a committee mark them? And, do we keep an iterative version and say, okay, this one is now complete? I can't recall what we've agreed on that.
I like a stoplight model.
Well, I noticed I don't know if this was intended, Judith, but I was asking Judith offline about the implementation plan by responsibility that has broken out by committee goals and objectives or goals and recommendations. And I see that there is a complete noted on that. And I'm curious if that was intended to be something we follow through with as things complete. Does this document track those completes? Or
that's the downtown district for EDC goal, right? Is that what that one is? Theirs is marked complete.
Yes. So I was curious if that's how we're doing it, or if we have an Excel recommendations for tracking worksheet too. That was
I mean, I don't think we ever really finalized how we were going to do the plan update at the most granular level, because we chose to go with a progress report from each committee that was more about how are you approaching it and how are you doing, as opposed to saying, going through recommendation by recommendation and getting a status update. Now, I know in some cases that's happening. So, for example, my recreation group, the first time I went through it, we went through recommendation by recommendation, and I have detailed notes that Jen Henson, that I'm going to send to Jen Henson, because she wants to see what we talked about last time, so that we can then review them for December. So I think it's been a little, it's been different for each group, and some groups I think are more likely to be able to have more granular, specifics around their recommendations, because the recommendations themselves are very granular. In other cases where it's a good example would be establish the community center committee. It's binary. We've either done it or we haven't done it. Now then there's a load of recommendations that sit underneath that might take longer, and some of them will need funding. So I think it's something we probably need to have at the next meeting, go through and start to talk about how are we going to capture this at the granular level, because I'm happy to do that. That was one of the things I said I would do, is keep a tracker, but I can't create a tracker of the progress reports because they're not sufficiently granular to be able to do that.
Judith,
Well,
I guess go ahead, Kate.
I'm sorry. Just on the progress report, question 4, if we're actually using it, says other recommendations, what's the completion status, 25, 50, 75, 100? Is that a helpful tool, or some way we can tweak that would be more beneficial to you, where you can get concrete information so you're not having to review and extract? You actually have maybe a list with a table or something. I don't know, something that would be.
I need to think about it, Kat. I need to think about what we've got, and maybe you and I can take one committee, one group, whichever you feel is most kind of active and ahead. I don't know whether that's conservation or
conservation.
Yeah, I was going to say, based on my social conversations with Melissa, I was like,
until Judith left, they were far ahead.
A Halloween candy. Yeah, so maybe maybe you and I can just find a little bit of time, and we'll use conservation as a kind of a guinea pig and a template. And we'll try and create a template of that, and then we can meet again and just talk about what we want to do.
Judith, where I was headed with this one was that I saw the spreadsheet as a way that we could update for our particular committees or goals here, basically a status update from time to time, and extend that, basically the cells out to the right, say as of October, end of October, here's where I am with this one, and end of November or whatever next date I want to put in, here's an update, etc., to sort of get a more verbal description of what's going on with each particular line item there. And then I continue to like the idea of the stoplight chart, where at each line you have a red, a yellow, a green bubble or circle there that says this one is done, this one's making progress, we haven't done much on this one, to get a quick visual picture to say, here are the things that are done. And at some point, I think we do a sort of, all the green ones go to the bottom of the pile down there, regardless of who has responsibility. And that keeps the focus on the ones that are in progress or we're not making progress on, or we maybe do, all the reds together to get attention on there about what needs to happen. And maybe even within those buckets, here's a red that we don't think is going to happen in the next 5 years. So we don't worry about, putting focus on it, but let's focus where we think we can make some progress. So to use that structure to organize resources and focus for things where we think we can make a difference there, and then have annotations about what's going on with each one of the tasks that I think we could collect. And I've actually sort of gone through my list mentally and tried to think about what I would write down there. And a lot of them I have things to say about, a number I don't have things to say about, but that helps me structure where I want to focus. So that was my sort of mental model of where this might be headed.
Yeah. And I think, potentially the dashboarding is a good way of kind of summarizing it, but in order to get to the dashboarding, you have to have the detail at that most granular recommendation level. And I think, you know, for me, the key is this prioritization. Because even within the Conservation Commission, my guess is, Kat, they're not working on all of the recommendations because some of them are very long term. So if we can, you know, this next round of conversations, I think should be around, okay, you know, we're 6 months on from where we were before. What are you prioritizing for this next year? Are you expecting to get money in the budget? If not, you know, it's just, do you need, you know, what support do you need? And that then becomes almost like the subset that you can then start to dashboard around. Because otherwise what will happen is, I think every time we go back to meet with people, if we're still working on 200 recommendations, there'll be a lot of reds because there was never an intention to work on them. See what I mean?
There's never an
It's
intention.
like you have to carve out and say, as we go into 2024, these are the recommendations that we're focused on. And there'll be others that are not a focus for 2024, other than maybe some, you know, basic research.
So maybe that's the ask of the committees, is what are your 2024
priorities?
Yeah. And I don't know.
Because everybody, I mean, it's not just the select board, I think, Sam.
Yep.
And maybe I'm seeing this differently now, but it's not just the select board that should be prioritizing their recommendations. I mean, I know we talked about this kind of idea of having the really big picture, more strategic kind of themed priorities.
Yeah.
But each committee should have their own priorities anyway, based on their master plan.
They should. But again, I think we got limited leverage on many committees. I mean, I can push on the select board, for example, and each of us has a group that we can push on, or groups we can push on. But some of these groups, again, you know, don't necessarily answer to us. So we can request and suggest and whatever, but we may have entities out there who say, yeah, that's on the master plan, but that's not part of our plan. So, you know, go away and don't bother us. And, you know, there's not a whole lot.
That's their choice. I mean, that's their choice. And they can say that, but in my view, our responsibility is to report out what is happening. Not what we would like them to be doing, but what is actually doing. So if then, you know, let's say for the sake of argument, I'm just making this up, I'm just picking on Kat again. Open space. Open space says, I'm not doing anything on the master plan this next year because I've got all these other things that we now view are a priority. That will happen. That should be reported out.
Yep.
You can't, you know, but I don't think we'd want to then say, well, everything on the open space is red because they're not doing it, but they've chosen not to do what's in the master plan.
Well, that should be read, though, in my view, if it's not happening, and it may be not happening for a good reason, but at least it's from a tracker standpoint for the master plan, that's part of the picture, I would think.
Well, it depends what time frame you're talking about.
Yeah.
If they're all, if all of the short-term ones are red, because, you know, they committed to doing them in 1 to 2 years and the master plan was signed off in June 2022, that means in theory there's only 6 to another potentially, let's call it a year. They've only got a year to get onto that one. So yeah, those would be. But if they're choosing not to do stuff that's long term, that's, you know, 5 to 10 years out, and we're only in the first year, we're going into the second year of the master plan, then
that's still red in my book because it's not happening yet. But again, I think people need to understand that measuring system, and you know, I think that's useful information, but there are different ways of looking at it, certainly. So I clearly, you know, defer to other people's views on that.
I mean, would it help to, I mean, I can definitely, let me work I'll volunteer to work with Kat, and we'll see if we can come up with an example and the template of how we might take this to the granular level to try and give the planning board a bit more specificity of I think what they seem to be looking for, but also to help us then think about how we're going to do some dashboarding. But would it help to look at the document that I sent out? And I'm sorry, I only got it out this afternoon. I got tied up with other things, which actually shows the select board goals mapped against the master plan.
Yep, I did look at that, and that's helpful. And again, there's a lot of overlap, and there are some places where there is not any overlap, which is not surprising.
Yeah, did everyone get a chance to have a look at that?
I took a quick look. Judith, do you want to bring it up?
Mm-hmm.
Do you mind?
No, let me just see.
Thank you for doing that. So that's the 24 goals from July, right? Well, yeah, 24 goals.
24, 28 or whatever there were, I think. More than we're going to get done.
Sorry, yes, that's the select board goals. How do I share screen? Kat, can you give me?
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't specifically not give it to you. I think it's just the way it works. So
Fault. Nobody can share but the host.
All right, you should be able to now.
Wait, let me see. Okay, and this is small, so let me see if I can make it bigger. Oh, actually.
Better?
Yep.
Okay, let me see if I can. Let me just pick. Is it not? Isn't. Why will it not go up to the top of the page? I really need the headings here. Hang on a minute. Let me just give that there. Maybe I have to do it this way. There you go.
Okay.
So trying to do it so that I can actually see my screen rather than everyone's lovely faces.
Yep, got it.
Okay. So what I did here is there's actually 3 tabs in this document because I couldn't get it all on one.
Yep.
But if you take the first one, this first section, which is admin and operations, I just took the goals of Sam's document. On the left-hand side, here's the individual goal. Here's the person that's responsible from the select board. And then what I did is I went through and looked for other master plan goals or master plan recommendations that map against these select board goals. So this is a different view than we had last time. For 2023, I kind of put the select board goals into the implementation document. But I think this time around, this seemed a bit more useful. And there's not necessarily a perfect match in every case, but so if we take, actually, let me give you a couple. So the IT updates, quite a specific set of recommendation or goals from the select board. The one that's mapped most closely to it is implement the recommendations of the town's technology strategy. I don't know if that is the same recommendation, Sam, or if it's just close enough.
I think that's close enough. Yep. Because
Okay.
that's one of the things that MTC is trying to do, the things that are on this list here.
Right.
And again, we have made some progress, but there's certainly some significant gaps there. So that's one I think that is, reasonably easy to describe where we are.
Yeah.
And I give that a yellow-orange kind of color,
Right.
reddish
But
yellow.
okay, so that one is a good one. But then if you go further down to line 17 and 18, find a better way, e.g. agile, to track ongoing projects. That is not a master plan recommendation.
Right.
So I view that one as internal to the select board.
Correct.
And there's several like that. Now these actually map at recommendation level. If you go down to say reform capital equipment funding,
Yep.
there's actually 6 recommendations in the master plan relating to capital planning. This is the goal. The overall goal was public services. So that's why I've mapped it at that level. So some of the mappings at goal level, some of the mapping is at recommendation level. But I think it does give a kind of a, for me, it gives a nice sense of some of the select board goals are operational. This is what we need to do to improve how we do business. And then some of them are actually related to the master plan, which is kind of what you would expect, because some of them are kind of more strategic in that sense.
Yep. I think this is a very, very helpful view, Judith, because again, I think there is at least a modest amount of overlap here. And, you know, I guess I'm not embarrassed by trying to hook a ride with the select board and claiming credit for the master plan progress as a result of select board or any other committee doing things to make progress on these things.
Right.
So I think that any progress, I think, is good, and it is notable in terms of communicating to the public, ultimately, to say, you know, the process seems to be working as far as accomplishing a wide range of things that are useful to happen in town.
Right. But you'll see, particularly on the ones around finance and what was it, admin and operation. These are recommendations that the select board's responsible for anyway.
Right. Yep.
You know, even if you go to the second one, let's go to the third one, which is around infrastructure. This is a, you know, design overall town plan for sidewalk and road networks. There you go. The number one goal on circulation and transportation was a select board goal.
Yep.
Develop and that was, I think, one of the themes that we talked about when you put your kind of original theme note together.
Right. Hopefully not a random concurrence here, but
I suspect not.
That's a good one, because I think we're actually making some progress on that one.
Yeah.
One question: should every committee that is in our purview have a list of their goals like this?
Well, Judith did send out that list that listed all the committees that have goals in the plan.
The plan, yes, but I mean, it seems like the select board has a separate set that Judith is trying to reconcile to.
Right, and Will, I guess I view that as because that's where the money is, basically.
Yeah.
And so I'm perfectly fine for any committee or board to have their own goals, and hopefully we've captured the bulk of what might happen from those during the entire master plan process. I mean, we had representatives from almost every committee, any major committee, participate in the process and get that input. So my expectation is that everybody's objectives and plans and so forth are represented, at least to some extent, in this
right list. But I mean, if we run across a committee that doesn't have a separate set of goals yet, it sounds like a good starting point is just to say, okay, here are the goals for you in the master plan, and then you might want to add to them as well.
Right, if there are, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, if they have them.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, something like recreation, for example. I go back to that one. They have a very comprehensive set of master plan recommendations. I think they had 5 overall goals, and I know when I talked with Kristen LeVault.
Right.
Is that her name? I can't remember.
Yeah, Kristen LeVault. Yeah, Kristen.
Yes. Kristen, she and I talked about the fact that they were sufficiently comprehensive that there probably wasn't anything else that recreation would want to be doing other than the stuff that they do as a matter of operations. So, you know, they organize, I think they organize Heritage Day, don't they? They organize Heritage Day. They organize the Gobble Wobble. All of those things are yes, they probably are. They're they're doing that, and they've got plans around that, but that's operational. They're doing it every day, every year. It's kind of business as usual. And I think what we said was the master plan was this more, here's the things that are really going to help us drive forward towards the vision for South by 2030. It's not just, well, we'll do the gobble wobble every year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
But I think that's a good point, Will. I mean, I think that's a good kind of conversation to have is, is there anything else that you're, just for our general information, is there anything else that you feel is a real priority for you this year? And because it could be that something's come up that no one anticipated when we signed off the master plan in June 2022.
Or they may have operational goals like the select board does.
Yeah.
That are important, and they may even need funding for, but aren't necessarily a master planned item.
Mm-hmm.
For sure.
Or it could be a group that was not at all included in the master planning process, like my own group of Board of Commissioners of Trust Funds, which has been invisible for a long time. And I mean, there, to the best of my knowledge, no specific goals there. I'm not quite sure how it might fit with this, but there are probably a few other groups out there who are not connected at all. So it wouldn't hurt to at least have a conversation.
Along those lines, and not for a topic of discussion tonight, but should we consider if there are new committees that are created, how master plan intersects with that? Like, would any of the master plan goals and recommendations be associated with new committees who would need to be either added to our master list or linked up in some way? Like, for example, if the pedestrian and bike committee does come into play, then we'll need to add them here and introduce that whole concept to the new committees.
Right.
And is it just long-term committees, or is it like project-specific committees, or is it, and we don't have to answer all those questions tonight, but that just popped into my head as you were talking about new committees.
I'm not sure that ad hoc committees, like we're working on, for example, this 21 Highland ad hoc committee, for example, I'm not sure that they're going to be short-lived. I think very specific purpose. I'm not sure they're appropriate. Again, but if there's a new, for example, there is a proposal to get rid of the Public Works Planning Board and make it the Public Works Advisory Committee, which would be locally controlled. And that group, if it comes into being, that would be a useful one to actually connect to this process. So, but that's going to be a year or so out in the future.
Yeah, I did notice that there was a recommendation to remove the Public Works Planning Board. Yeah. They do have a goal and recommendations, so obviously as part of that process you will be somebody, whoever it is.
Basically they're replacing it, so there were other things in there, I think, goals for the Public Works Planning Board, as a matter of fact.
Quite a lot, actually.
Yeah,
sidewalks and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so they're making progress without meeting.
Yeah, well, they have 8 recommendations that I'm sure they will be transitioned. But that, so let's just talk a specific there. That is a really good example of where we would want to report back to the planning board to say there is a subsection of this master plan where responsibility has been transitioned to another group, because that needs to be updated so we know where we are.
Right. And frankly, if there are things that are now assigned to the Public Works Planning Board that belong somewhere else or could be moved somewhere else, because the Public Works Planning Board is not going to be doing anything, as far as I can tell, Debbie, for the next foreseeable future here, until sometime later next year, at least. Do we want to think about reallocating some? I don't know, but it would be worth thinking about maybe.
Yeah, I like that idea. I spent some time just, as we all have, kind of looking through the goals and getting to know our groups and all this. And, sometimes it's questionable, like, how did this group end up with that goal, but, we know how that works. They might be responsible for it, but they've got to work with others to get it accomplished. But the Public Works Planning Board is a good example where we think that mainly that's going to transition over to the Public Works Advisory Committee if it's voted at town meeting. we may want to explain if there's any, I mean, sidewalks came to mind, and I know that there's movement on the sidewalks, but we might want to explain that, you know, in the report that, you know, it's pretty apparent why some of those goals won't be met because the committee doesn't really meet. I did want to let you guys know that somewhere in our charge, and I think in the master plan, it does also describe that the our committee master plan implementation is responsible to give a report to the planning board for town meeting. And so Judith and Kat, as you're thinking about, you know, maybe trying to display the information in a more meaningful way for the planning board or something like that, we also have to think about what kind of format we would like to give for the annual report.
Not to get into the weeds, but definitely thinking about it. But if the town meeting happens in March, then we would have already submitted our December report, and our next report is due in June. So it kind of comes in the middle. It seems to me like we would be reporting on what was last known rather than scrambling to get updated information. Does that ring initial truth to anybody?
I'm fine with using the December report for town meeting.
Yeah.
And say we've gotten some more things. And frankly, our current moderator is putting the lid on reporting for town meetings. So
Excuse what?
Putting the lid on reporting for town meetings. So you're going to be lucky to get 5 minutes for something like this. So I don't think we're going to have opportunity.
Just limiting the presentations to a smaller amount of time.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so there's plenty in our December report for the planning board to report to town meeting about.
And does it have to be a verbal report, or is it I don't like printing reports, but
and it certainly could be verbal. I guess I could envision, you know, a 3-minute update from the planning board chair to say master plan implementation committee has been, you know, making progress. We've made progress on 23 goals and completed 12 or whatever it might be. And anybody who wants information, check the website and there's a full update available there, but it's happening and we're making progress.
I think it might be a nice opportunity to spend 60 seconds on thanking the committees who are implementing these goals and recommendations, so they get one, visibility for their efforts, and two, a nice big thank you, and make it kind of a gratitude post.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'm corrected. So you're right. It's the update is for town meeting, not the annual report. So I guess there's nothing that's published in annual report. According to our charge, we prepare something for the planning board to present at town meeting. So
why wouldn't it go in annual report though? Why wouldn't there be an update?
Yeah.
You're a committee. We are a committee, and committees are asked to provide updates for the annual report. It seems
planning board
idea.
could certainly include us in their annual report for the town's annual report, but we could also do one. Actually, my bet is if we did one, we could request to get it in there and they would include it.
Okay.
When does the annual report come out?
Well, they ask for updates in December, right? And then it prints in March. Is that your understanding?
Yeah.
Mr. Select Board Member.
I think it needs to be higher level. I like what you just said, Sam, sort of this high level. We've, you know, of the 201 goals and recommendations, 23 have, you know, made it 80% or something like this, instead of getting into the weeds of all the different, you know, the kind of the level that we're hoping to continue to give to planning board. Mm-hmm. But I see what you're saying. Whatever is created for that December report, we could use from that to provide for the annual report or town meeting.
Yeah, with a footnote that of course things have been happening in Q1. This is just reported as of December, just so in case things have shifted and people feel like, oh, you didn't update it for my biggest accomplishment that just happened in February.
Yeah.
Cover all bases.
But the Kat's recognition point, we could also have a Hall of Fame section for the people who are doing well, and the list of shame for the people who haven't done anything.
Oh, you're getting into some trouble.
We could have prizes. We could have prizes. We have a budget.
Just don't call it a raffle and you're okay.
That's right, exactly.
Don't call it a what?
A raffle.
It's an inside joke. Don't use the word raffle in town. It gets
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Ruffles
really?
feathers.
No, no raffles,
No ruffles.
conflict of interest or whatever.
No ruffles.
Okay, so where are we in the agenda? So we're sort of we're talking about
We're still on item 1, aren't we?
no, I think we're really morphed into the third one is the report to the planning board. Do we want it? So one thing about the member updates, do we want to continue to do member updates where we all give verbal updates about what's going on each of our sponsoring groups? Or how do we want to do that going forward? Because we were doing that, and then, you know, we're continuing now with our progress report. So do we want to only do it through the progress reports, and how do we want to hold our meetings in the future? Do we want to give updates on all of our groups, or only the groups that are making progress and having trouble? Or how do we want to do that?
Good question.
I'm happy with reading the grid for updates, frankly. I mean, I don't think it
The grid, the progress report.
unless there's the progress, unless there's something that somebody has, you know, wants to make special mention of, or an issue that's come up that might be useful for the rest of the group to be aware of, or think about, or participate in, or whatever. So I mean, I think it's, you know, it's sort of a waste of time to read through stuff unless there's something notable there.
Yeah.
It's a waste of time. I couldn't hear you, Sam.
To read through, you know, the matrix update stuff unless there's something notable that people need to know. So maybe the opportunity for people to report on anything they think is worth reporting on, versus here are the 23 things I did last month.
Well, I think that there's a number one on the progress report is high level report summary, like a quick summary. So if that was what was read, that was a way to distill important pieces so that could then be copied and pasted to some report to planning board. That might be something that could be focused on to keep it really simple and not mundane.
Yep.
Okay.
And to your point, so I'm curious about that, Debbie, because we all have to meet with our committees before we can send in a final report. So that may take over a couple meetings, right? Unless, because we might not all be successful at the same time. So how does that work with, do we set a date like this? The meeting in November will be the meeting where we give all our updates because we're compiling report for December reporting, like, or does that happen over a span of a couple meetings? It seems like we should work towards one date I think I will just throw it out there as a recommendation, like late November, if that's when we're meeting, we all have to have reports due by then. That's an idea. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, that feels about right, because I know it's going to take me time, and it's going to take all of us some time.
And we can forget about meeting with people in December. We start to lose people, I think, on focus, you know, with busy holidays and vacation schedules and stuff. I don't know how successful we'll be at getting anyone's feedback in December.
Yeah. How about you, Will? How have you been doing with your, it seems like you were very connected with your sponsoring groups.
I have not been very connected since the last time, and so I need to pick that up.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I've done sort of general updates with people, but less focused on the master plan stuff, as a matter of fact. So I need to circle back. Let's go back to Kat's question about timing, though, in the sense that if we owe the planning board a report in December,
yep,
that again says that clearly November, you got to have all of that ready to go, and then we need to put the pieces together in early December or thereabouts and have something done by mid-December, because as you suggest, not much is going to happen in the last half of December there. So, I mean, that makes sense in terms of overall timing. And we will then have data basically from mid to late November for this thing that eventually basically goes to the town meeting report or the annual report. And if we have a chance later, early first quarter next year, to update things a little bit at least. But I don't think that that's a big problem, in the sense that as long as we're going to high level reporting, we're either on track or not on track kind of stuff that we can talk about. So I think that works time wise.
do we want to, I guess a little out of order, but do we want to look at dates? So, I mean, I think for this committee, the majority of the work gets done outside of this meeting. You got to go out and meet people and get our progress and track it. So I'm thinking, I don't know where Thanksgiving is, but I'd be willing to take a look at the calendar and see if, you know, we can come up with a date. Yeah.
The 30th?
I'd rather aim toward the end of the month.
Well,
Yeah.
we have to get on people's agendas and hope that they schedule a meeting for November. And if they don't, we'll have to reach out to the chair and just say, hey, can you help us fill out this report? Can we meet for a few minutes or something? If they don't.
I like the 30th. I'd like the 30th.
You like the 30th? Let me take a look. I wanted to ask, that's a good point though, Kat. How's everybody doing with that? I know Judith, you had gotten successfully on some agendas like Historical Commission. Others that I've worked with, I'm working through with coordinators and directly, you know, planner. You know, are you finding it's more beneficial to meet with the committee, the full committee, or with the chair? Or is it kind of mixed?
I think it's a mixed bag for me. Some tell me, no, thank you, I don't have time to meet, and here's the update. And then I have not actually been to it. So conservation's so organized that they can just fill it out and send it over. Yeah, so I think mine's going to be a little ad hoc this time too. I personally prefer to go before the committee if it's not the Conservation Commission, because they're busy anyway, but other committees. But if they don't have time on the agenda, then I would just go to the chair and get a quick update.
I mean, I went to recreation and historic. I haven't been to schools because they now got a, you know, Katura had moved on, and I can't remember the person's name, but I know. I mean, I guess I was waiting for the communication Debbie to go out to kind of allow me to kick
for the process. Yeah, and they've got a couple of new committee members as well, I think, there. So schools are moving target a little bit. Just trying to think. The chair there is Kamali O'Mealy, I think, and I'm trying to think of anybody else there who's been involved in the master planning process. Not so much. I mean, Roger Challen, I think, is supportive of the process and might be somebody useful to talk with, but tough to get a connection there. Superintendent is the guy that I've always gone to there, Greg Martineau. But
yeah, I mean, my observation on the schools goals and recommendations is they are not really project based. So, you know, it's not like we're going to build a community center, or we're going to establish a pedestrian and bike committee and they're going to come up with a plan of pedestrian bike access. A lot of the schools,
they're talking about building a $60 million school, so that's pretty project oriented.
Not in the master plan though.
No, it's not. That's right.
Not in the master plan. But a lot of them are more, I don't know how you describe them. You probably go back and have a look at them, but they're more almost sort of philosophical around this is how we're going to do business within the schools. I mean, some of them are more specific, like, you know, connecting with, you know, education opportunities in the town. But, you know, some of them I would describe as ongoing. It's like, this is how the schools do business. So, and that's why I want to have the conversation with Kamali and see the best way to report out on it.
Yep. You know, Judith, if it would be helpful, I think it's important to get the superintendent in that conversation as well, because he actually drives most of the, I'd say, operational things, certainly, and certainly drives the budget. The committee, you know, provides guidance and approves the budgets, but he is where the rubber hits the road in terms of that. I would be happy to facilitate a meeting.
That would be awesome, Sam.
Greg and Kamali and participate in that, because I've talked with Greg on a variety of occasions about the planning process historically. So I think I've got a connection there. Open the door for that one, if that makes sense.
That would be great.
Okay, I will work on that.
Okay, and
Are
I
you-
didn't forget about Sam's proposal for the next meeting.
November 30th works for me.
November
Uh,
30th works for me as well.
I have no idea where my calendar is, but is it a Thursday?
It's a Thursday, yeah. It works for me also.
I'll
Last
make it
Thursday.
work unless
Make it-
unless I get an invitation somewhere. It's super exciting. But
Wait a minute.
So,
Is there something
do we want
important?
to try a little later? Because I know 6:30 is kind of cutting it for some. Do we want to move it to 7 or 6:45? That would be radical.
I would be open, but I don't want to dictate if the committee wants to do 6:30. I just my days just run into my nights. A lot of work, especially recently. So it's
So you want earlier or later, Kat?
7 or 6:45 would be
Oh, okay.
better.
I'm fine with any. So 7 would be fine for me, certainly.
7's fine.
Thank you.
Yep.
David, does that work for you too?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I'm sorry to make it about me, but
No. That's fine.
Judith, if I can back up a second, are you in town for the next couple of weeks or so here? So if I set up something with the schools?
No, I'm out from the 5th, 6th to the 16th of November.
Oh, so if we did it
Not
before
next
the
week, it's gonna have to be, yeah.
But we could do it next week, maybe.
Yeah, you're talking during the day
Yeah, I could do it during the day. Yeah.
or evenings. Let me send you my calendar or some options, Sam.
So after the 16th, the next week is Thanksgiving week there, so we're pushing a little tight. But
Yeah.
okay, send it to me, and we'll try to work around that then. Okay, good.
Okay. I did want to ask, well, before we move on, I guess I'm jumping around on the agenda as I usually do. We don't have a draft minutes, right, from last meeting? No minutes to approve this meeting, right?
yeah, we do.
They
Right.
came out the day after the meeting.
Yeah,
Oh,
so I
yes,
sent
you
the-
did.
and then Judith circulated a typo, or she corrected them. So I
That's
just
correct.
sent them around again. I can pull them up now if we want to take a look. And
We
I read
read it so long ago. I did look at them.
Yeah, I'm
Has
fine.
everybody looked at them, or do we want to bring it up?
Well, let's just look at what Judith had suggested, because that did get around. Yes, Sam?
If it was a typo, I defer to Judith, but I read it. I'm fine. So
Are you guys seeing my screen?
I see the screen.
Which one do you see? October 5th?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down, and she corrected this. Secretary versus clerk.
Secretary.
And added on line 48, this in red.
That was just me.
Yep.
That was just a kind of a note to say who was actually was it who was
I think it was me, and I don't know if we need to include, did you want to include that in the minutes, or it's just I believe the action was me, so it's with me.
You want me to put you in there?
You can put me in there.
Okay.
I mean, with the help of Colleen is actually helping to set that up. But after the last planning board, they want the opportunity to look at the goals before scheduling this meeting.
Yeah, but that's okay. We'll have that in this meeting minutes, right?
Yep.
With assistance of Colleen. What's her last name, so I can just be thorough?
Oh, Stansfield.
Thank you.
Yep.
Is that spelled right? Just as
yeah, it is.
Then I will take this out, Judith.
Yeah.
Great. And then down here we added in prep Judith J. Watson 2, line 61. And that was it.
Mm-hmm.
So I make a motion, we approve the October 5th, 2023 minutes as amended.
Will Warren seconds.
Any discussion? Hearing none. All in favor, Demiria, aye.
Stivers, aye.
P.I.
Watson, aye.
Warren, aye.
Unanimous.
So I, as the last job I'll ever do as secretary for this committee. We'll submit.
You did a nice job, Kat. Plus you get these meetings set up for me. You're awesome.
Just for the minutes this time, Judith, you want to note that the EDC coordinator, Leah Emerson, was in attendance, as well as Claire Reynolds. I usually put the visitors in the minutes. If
Okay.
Super.
Should we ask if there's any public comment? Just remind me again, we're putting public comment at the beginning and the end as a policy, Sam? As a
Select board does, so we can do anything we want. We can have no public comment or beginning and end or only one.
Is there anybody in the audience right now?
No, everyone left. Can you actually not allow people to speak in a public meeting?
Yeah, you don't have to have public comment. No requirement from the state to have public comment.
Well, why are our meetings public if you don't allow people to talk?
Because they can be here, just not allowed to say anything.
They can
Well,
listen.
that's just
Not interactive with the public, but they can
I'm
view
not
it.
sure I'm not sure. I'm not sure why you would have public comment at the beginning and the end, though.
Well, partly because there's some people who have trouble getting there for the beginning of the meetings, and some people who don't want to stay for the full meeting. And so you want to give them, my view is you want to give people a reasonable chance to talk, start or finish.
Oh, okay. The public comment at the beginning, though, is presumably because they've read something in the minutes or seen something in the last minute meeting and they want to come and talk about it. Because otherwise, what are they going to talk about? If you
public comment is limited to anything that's not on the agenda. So in other words, the idea is that you don't want to debate things that aren't on the agenda, because if you do that, then other people who didn't know that you were going to talk about that don't have an opportunity to anticipate it and show up if they care about the topic. So it's important to list everything on the agenda that's going to be discussed during the meeting, but that you have opportunity for people to say, you know, I've got a problem with this, or I think somebody did a good job with that, or whatever, just to make a comment generally in the public setting. And then we also at the select board get people who do public comment and say, I would like to get this item on a future agenda, please. So would you consider that? And so there's opportunity to do that as well. So
okay,
that's the thought, at least. So, but we frightened away all of our attendees, so succeeded here. So. Or bored them to death, at least.
Yeah, bored them to death. So I'd like to solicit maybe, you know, in the next couple of weeks, if you have any ideas for what we should put on the next agenda. So next item, next agenda on November 30th. Will we have, so I know Kat and Judith, you're going to go off and look at kind of how to maybe think about different presentation for the report, maybe dashboard. Is that?
Well,
yeah, how to present status of, right? How to present status.
I think we need to look at how we're going to capture progress at the most granular level, and then how do we potentially use a dashboarding approach?
Okay, so for the rest of us,
the planning board,
we're still going out, we're doing the outreach, we're doing our progress reports, we're doing the same thing. Will you have sort of a prototype or something for us for the next meeting, or an output or something like that?
You can try, but at the you know, in the short term, keep notes on a small piece of paper.
Yeah, and actually, if we could align expectations, it might not be realistic with Judith's travel and Kat's schedule for us to connect in November, and I think that's probably okay. And we can try to do something maybe in December. And if you want to have it as an agenda item to see if anyone's had any other brainstorms, that might be an inclusive way to approach it. But I think that might be better suited for a December meeting.
Okay.
Do we have an end of the year report due?
Yeah, so I think to your point, Debbie, the question is we should all come with as many progress reports we can by November 30th.
Yeah, well, we had an ambitious goal originally of a quarterly report to the planning board, and they asked for it twice a year. So then the our committee decided it was going to be June and December.
Right.
Or-
But just so that we're all on the same page here, right? The frequency of connecting with the individual boards and committees is no different than it was originally.
Right, it's split
The
up.
original idea was that we had like a staggered meeting and reporting schedule. So every board and committee was going to meet with us or was going to have a update twice a year. And we'd report to the planning board 4 times a year because of how it's being staggered. That was the whole point, so that the planning board gets regular updates, but we only have to meet with our boards and committees twice a year. But so now it's the same. We're just kind of shoehorning it into a much, more limited window to get out and do the progress reports and prepare the report, which is fine. I mean, that's if the planning board only wants it twice a year, that's fine. They're going to get the same information as they would have done if they'd stuck with the quarterly. But
So does that mean those that I met with last time, I focus just on those that I didn't meet with, and that was a long time ago. I feel like
Yeah.
to
I don't think
be
it
thorough.
circle back. I'd circle back to all of them, actually.
yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to have to if the planning
Okay.
board
Okay,
wants.
as long as I'm
twice
not
yearly report.
overthinking that. Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah.
And that's not, 6 hours with each one kind of thing. I think.
Oh
again,
no, quick and dirty. Not dirty, but quick.
I was thinking dirty, but not quick.
I didn't want to be dirty. Okay.
Okay, that makes sense. So we'll have no expectations that yes, if you have agenda items, send them to me, but we will not plan on any more granular report or whatever. That activity will happen in December. But we'll all do our inputs. Hopefully I can still find it in the Google Drive. Oh yeah, we're doing them offline, right? We're doing them offline, right? The progress reports, right?
Yes, because Google Drives likes to mess up the drop down. So if you want me to send around the progress report so it's in everyone's inbox today, I can do that now.
That would be good to have that latest one.
Yeah, Kat, that would be
Yeah, happy to.
Yeah. Okay.
So
any other topics for tonight?
Yeah, I just so everyone know, I did take an action to talk to Colleen about a couple of minor updates to the website. I have done that. She's not made them yet, so I will go and remind her that she needs to make that. So adding Debbie as the chair and adding the link to the master plan implementation committee onto the master plan page. The other thing that I found, yes, is Debbie, we need to formally communicate to the town clerk's office that our board roles have changed.
Yes.
And then
So you just
change the PDF.
You just have to email Amy. Just email Amy and say these are the new roles and just confirm which set of minutes it was approved in.
Which is, I think, the October 5th minutes just approved.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you for that reminder. I didn't realize, I did notice that my name wasn't on there and they said, no, you have to send when the vote was taken for the roles.
So yeah, so there's 2 different things. There's putting your name on our webpage.
Yeah.
Just your name. But if you click on the link that takes you to all the boards and committees,
yeah,
our roles are not up to date. I think you're still on there as the clerk, and
it's that spreadsheet. Yeah. Okay.
It's just like a little section. That's what needs to be. That's what we need to send the email to Amy and tell her which set of minutes it was referenced in.
Okay. I'll take that action then to do that. Thank you. Thanks, Judith. Wondering how these things get done. Okay, guys, anything else tonight? No.
Think so.
Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Seconded.
Second. Third it. With
No
a doozy.
discussion. Hearing no discussion.
Roll call.
Roll call, Demiria, aye.
Driver's eye.
Mickey, I.
What's the nine?
Warren, aye.
Thanks,
And with
everybody.
that,
Yeah,
Thanks.
good night.
that
Good
is
night.
it. Thanks so much. See you guys.